For a regular city commission meeting. Let's start with roll call vote, please, or roll call, period, please.
Mayor Skidmore,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Allen,
Present.
Commissioner Kaler, Commissioner Clayton,
Present.
and Commissioner Crowley.
Present.
Okay, we do have a quorum, so I want to welcome everybody here in the chambers. Got a full house, it looks like. That's always good to see, as well as those watching on some form of social media. So we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the invocation by Pastor Timothy Roth of Faith Lutheran Church.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. O sovereign God, by your omnipotent hand you have given us dominion over your creation. Yet we, through the abuse of liberty gave corrupted your good creation. In our fall you have given governing authorities the sword to curb sin, establish justice, and promote peace. You command them to approve those who do what is good and right according to your will, and to bring your wrath upon those who do wrong in rebellion. Therefore we pray your Spirit be upon these your servants, that they wield the sword according to your will and command. Enlighten and defend them as they deliberate and fulfill their duty. Grant them divine counsel and understanding. Guide them and protect them for the sake of your people and for the general welfare of the citizens of Ottawa. Help them fulfill their responsibilities with integrity by turning to your statutes and following your will. In your almighty name we pray. Amen.
Appreciate that, Pastor. I also appreciate your involvement in our community. I see you at so many chamber coffees, and so I just appreciate you being out in the community like you should, and I appreciate you coming here today too, so thank you very much for that. We'll move on to public comments.
We have one for item XA.
Okay, we'll wait till then to read that then. Let me see, XA. Okay, very good. We'll do that. Next item would be the appointments, presentations, and recognitions. And we have a very important one here, presentation of KMU Power Plant Operator Certificate to John Thompson. But before John presented this, let me just read a little bit about his bio. Very worthy bio, I would say. We're pleased to recognize John Thompson for his outstanding achievement in completing the KMU Power Plant Operations Academy. This program, which consists of approximately 240 hours of instructional contact time spread over 2 years, is designed to train and advance individuals in the electrical generation industry. Through his dedication, John has successfully navigated this rigorous program, demonstrating his commitment to professional growth and excellence. John began his career at the City of Ottawa in April of 2013 as a custodian in the police department and was promoted to senior custodian in 2015. In November of 21, he embraced a new challenge, joining the power plant as Electric Plant Operator 1, and in November of 24, it was promoted to Operator 2. Since then, John has continued to excel, also completing the KU Public Management Center's Emerging Leaders Academy in June of 24. His positive attitude, dedication to continuous improvement, and exceptional service to the citizens of Ottawa are evident in all he does. And tonight, we celebrate John's accomplishment in earning this certificate, which further highlights his growth and readiness for future leadership opportunities. Congratulations, John, on this well-deserved recognition, and thank you for your continued commitment to our community. John. I should introduce, yes, come on up here. John Littleton, also here from KMU. We're going to say a few words. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, thank you very much. John Littleton, I am the Director of Energy Services with Kansas Municipal Utilities. Could not add more to Mr. Skidmore's comments, or we appreciate that. And he's exactly right. It takes a lot of commitment from the student to actually obtain the certification and go through the process. There's a lot of information they actually have to do, a lot of research, become true experts in their own field and their own right. So we appreciate John's attention to detail, his dedication to the program, and we congratulate him. He actually has earned the gold certificate for the power plant operator certification through KMU. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much. Take care.
What I particularly like about this is we're able to grow organically like this, to have people internally start somewhere and then build up and grow into the position they're in. And so I'm very thankful for those kind of opportunities that our city provides for employees. So thank you all for city management too, for encouraging this to take place in our city. So thank you all for that. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Everybody had a chance to look over the agenda for tonight.
Mr.
If
Mayor,
so, Commissioner, go ahead.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Do we have a motion? We have a second.
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Move on to item 9. At this time, I'd like to give the commissioners a chance to declare any conflict or communication they've had that might influence their ability to consider today's issues impartially. Hearing none, we'll go on to item 10.
Item XA, ordinance regulating camping and storage of personal property in public space and right-of-way.
The city manager, Silcott, will present the ordinance addressing camping within public rights of way.
Honorable governing body members, this is the third presentation and discussion regarding this item. And as we had shared previously and had received several rounds of feedback and also had numerous engagement sessions with our area stakeholders and both the social capital side who provide the services to our homeless community. And the intention of this crafting is that it would be utilized by our community policing professionals as a course of last resort once all means of social or civic capital or assistance has been exhausted, and or there's unwillingness or there is a life safety issue. And the intention again is not to be wielded as a initially right out of the gate unless there's an immediate life safety issue. It's been drafted to where any sort of violations would be addressed in municipal court, and that is not a criminal nature, and would also be up to the discretion of both the prosecutor and the judge for how that would be proceeded. So what we've done is offered a stair step of violations and also a cap, a max cap for those violations, which again are subject to input from both the prosecutor and our municipal court judge for that. And I want to take the time to also thank City Attorney Finch for his work on this, as I know that we did our absolute best to craft a legal document, but not forgetting the point with which this is coming from, which is to assist those most in need and also to serve the entirety of our community. And it's specifically needed so that we can address not only those needs of that segment of our community, but also we currently do not have the span with what's on the books that covers all public right-of-way or facilities such as City Hall or other parks and pathways that could pertain and fall into this. It's also been coordinated through the efforts of our police department and Chief Weingartner with the sheriff's office, and allowed us to work with our community to try and get to a point where we're able to improve the living conditions that they may be experiencing, and to assist with site remediation and cleanup that we're already underway with our public works and our community policing division, as well as our neighborhood and community services and other volunteers. So with that, I'll turn it over for questions that the governing body may have of myself, staff, or Chief Weingartner, or director or DJ, or any one of us, Director Neese, that you might have regarding our response and where this is coming from.
Okay. I appreciate the letter that Ms. Riggins sent, and she did recommend something about a 48-hour allowance instead of the 24 that we have proposed. And Personally, I think that's fine. I can't see where another 24 hours is going to cause any more problems for us. The question I have, and maybe legal counsel can tell us on this, but if there is someone set up in an illegal area and they move, but they just move 20 feet, that doesn't count as a new 48-hour timeline. Is that correct?
So, Mr. Mayor, there's always going to be law enforcement discretion in how the laws are enforced. You'll notice that many times someone isn't pulled over for speeding when they're going 32 and a 30. Typically, there's some discretion exercised by the men and women in law enforcement, and we trust that that will be the case here as well. Not to make the language vague or overbroad, it's specific. It's to post a notice that camping in this area is prohibited. And I will tell you that very similar language exists in Topeka, and they have already utilized their ordinance to help clear some encampments down along the river. And this uses the same timeline and the same notice timeline. That is a minimum, so it can be more. And most of the enforcement actions that we've seen do give more notice, even though they're not required to. And they tend to post an area. This tends not to, those enforcement actions that we've seen in other communities tend to be multiple folks clustered together living in an area. Here, we have seen a decrease in the population living along the levee, and that's due in large part to the efforts of our community partners and to our police department. And I would suspect that you may see something slightly different here, in that you may have one person or two people camping together. But the signage would be posted in that general area, and if the property were to be impounded, it would be difficult to go back and camp there again, because the tent, the sleeping bag, the camping stove, propane heaters, etc., would be impounded until the fine were paid. But secondarily, it would then, if they were in the same area, the first notice would suffice to ask them to move again. And if they move to an area, say disparate, say they moved a mile down the levee but still in the city limits, then we would probably exercise a new posting. Again, that's the last resort. First resort is, can we get you to the help and services that you need? Can we make you aware of shelters that might be available, and move someone from being in that condition to a better quality of life?
And then the levee itself is owned by the city. What city property, or is Corps of Engineers own this?
It's controlled and managed by the Army Corps of Engineers,
Okay.
but there's a duty for the city to maintain and take care of that floodway.
All right. And if we do confiscate their property, I assume there's some way we will inventory all their items so that we'll be able to properly document that they say they'd had a computer here, but we didn't get one, and they might say they left one there. It's a liability issue for the city. I just wouldn't be concerned.
Unfortunately, our law enforcement officers have decades of experience at property that is collected pursuant to investigations that they undertake. Those are criminal investigations. In this case, it would not be that, but the ordinance does require that they inventory the property that they take, and that they actually go back to the place where it was taken from and post a notice of what was taken, and that way the person whose property they have can come back and say, this is my property, and pay their fine and get a fee and get it back.
And they'll be able to identify their property ownership by if they went and say those are my things, how do we know they are truthful and that these are my things? Have it set up.
And so the ordinance has the process in it. For you. The post removal notice is on page 4 and concerns a general description of the property, the date and approximate time the property was removed, statement that the property was stored in violation of the ordinance, the place where they can get the property, and that they have 90 days to do so. Property that the city impounds must be stored, and then the owner or person entitled to the impounded property may repossess the property upon submitting satisfactory proof of ownership and paying the redemption fee. A person may establish proof of ownership by, among other methods, describing the location and date when the personal property was impounded and providing a reasonably specific and detailed description of the
That would do it
personal
right
property.
there. Okay, great, thank you. Any more questions anyone have?
Attorney Finch, on the distance within a dangerous or unsafe structure, I know you had mentioned, dilapidated, unsafe structures. Is that 10-foot kind of standard language instead of almost specifying on a parcel where that structure exists? Or would there be spots on a parcel that you would technically be more than 10 foot away from the building that would almost be a gray area in terms of kind of the ordinance?
So there's two sections there, and two subsections in section 3, Commissioner. The first is subsection 3, within 10 feet of any doorway, loading dock, stairway, fire escape, or public restroom. So that 10 feet restriction applies to those areas. And we have seen camping take place in those areas, in and around public restrooms, in and around doorways and loading docks. And then the second one that you're talking about is subsection E, and that's any property that contains a structure that's been declared a nuisance, been condemned, or lacks a certificate of occupancy or does not have current utility. So anywhere on that lot where there is a condemned structure, camping would be prohibited. But the 10 feet restriction only applies to that subsection C.
Yeah, I apologize. I was reading the analysis instead of that.
Yep.
Thank you.
Good.
Mayor, if I could ask Chief Weingartner to speak on this. I had some questions for him back when we were first introduced to this, and I think he explained some things very well, especially in regards to them having essentially internal procedures or policies in relation to this. So it will go hand in hand, but their procedures may look a little different. So if you could explain a little bit about that.
The collection and storage of the property side of it?
Really, maybe overall enforcement, if
Yeah.
that's okay?
Sure. Yeah, so under the community policing units kind of directive, this will support their initiatives, and all of the work that they have done up until today will continue if this ordinance is approved. None of the work they do pre the ordinance is going to change. It only enhances the things that they're able to do after the ordinance passes, and our approach will not change. It is always going to be enforcement as a last resort. We know a lot of the people that we are working with are already in a precarious situation, and we do not want to add to that burden by starting with enforcement, assessing a fine that they may not be able to pay, and certainly add that stress and burden to their life. So the team's really conscious of that. All of the questions that you all have asked, and the community has asked, and our community partners have asked, were first asked of me by our community policing team. And they had probably asked some of the toughest questions in this, because they know they're going to be the ones going out doing the work that we're going to ask them to do if this passes. So none of that approach will change as long as we're involved and as long as that community police is involved. And again, I'm going to go back and say what I've said a few times before, but to thank the commission and the community and the city manager for allowing the support, especially the financial support, to allow that community policing team and the crisis corresponder to work. It has been a huge add value to our community and our department. And I think they've demonstrated how good of the work they can do. And that's going to continue with the ordinance.
Thank you. I really appreciate the statement, enforcement as a last resort. So that's exactly what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Any more questions of the chief while he's at the microphone?
Thank you.
All right, thanks, chief.
And again, our purpose is to support the vulnerable populations that we have in the community and to balance concerns and preserving public spaces and supporting our economic and community well-being, while also having a process that fosters collaboration and support for assisting in the humane treatment of our unhoused population, and so that we can support that collective response in our community.
We do have public comments, correctly? Okay. Let me just read this before we call on the people to make public comments. Subject to the above restrictions, persons who wish to address the city commission regarding items on the agenda may do so as that agenda item is called. Persons who wish to address the city commission regarding items not on the agenda and that are under the jurisdiction of the city commission may do so at this time when called upon by the mayor. Comments on personnel matters and matters pending in court or with other outside tribunals are not permitted. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Any presentation is for informational purposes only. The governing body will take comments under advisement. Who do we have today?
Julie Riggin.
Julie, you come forward. Good afternoon, Julie.
Good afternoon. I would just like to say, as a last-ditch effort, this is setting a precedence. And so I appreciate Chief Weingartner's comments, but when it comes down to it, when he retires or he moves on, we have a precedent. Mr. Silcott has said we want to help them, point them to shelter. My question is, where? There's no place in Ottawa. Lawrence is not taking people who do not live in Lawrence, Douglas County. And they will be the first to tell you that. They have to be in Lawrence for at least, I believe it's 2 weeks at the very minimum, before they will even consider sheltering them, because they have their own issues. Topeka was mentioned. Ottawa is very different than Topeka. Very different than Topeka. We know these neighbors. Topeka, their commissioners, their city council, they don't know these people. They're homeless. So I ask each of you, when you vote, to keep in mind who you are affecting and how much you are affecting their lives. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Julie. We have any other comments? That's it, okay. Well, I'll just say this, I know that it was a concern, and I heard a lot of feedback over the last several years, in fact, of some of the people hanging around Legacy Square and the Goppert Children's Park, and I know that was a major concern, a lot of the people that didn't feel like they were safe or didn't feel comfortable going to those facilities we paid a lot of money for to provide for our citizens. For the last year or so, I've not heard any complaints on that property. I haven't seen anybody around there. Maybe they are. I don't know where they are or where they went, but I'm not seeing the ones I used to. And so that part of me thinks, okay, maybe some of this is working. Maybe not to the extent it should be, but maybe it's working already. But I don't know. Anyone else want to comment on this?
I think, kind of following Julie's idea, and I've talked to a lot of folks about this as well, and a lot of folks, and I had the initial idea at one point of, is there a space? Can you find somewhere for them to go to isolate, kind of a specific space for that? And when you really start fleshing that idea out, I've learned a lot. So I appreciate all those people who've had conversations with me as well in terms of who governs that, who has liability for that, those types of things that are hard. Does the city, if they're on city property, have that liability? If they're on Hope House properties, that Hope House. And I think a larger issue obviously ties into this. And we're not going to answer that with approving or denying this ordinance and figuring out how that may work best. But I think for me, I know specifically kind of bringing up some of those thoughts and how that true liability of allowing a space really does work when it's not personal property. And so just kind of as something that I've had to kind of keep in mind throughout this whole process is, how does that look, and who are the community partners that if something down the line were to be looked at, continue to work with those existing community partners we have and find a solution that is, Julie kind of said, humane to those most vulnerable in the community, but also protects kind of everyone else as well.
And I would like to agree and build on that. I would say definitely, whether this passes or not, I think it's a conversation to continue having, finding solutions, and not just let it stop here.
And what do you all think about the 24 hours versus 48? I get some opinions on that as well. I think Julie requested 48, and I see no problem with that myself. But what do the other commissioners think of that time frame if we pass this?
I think 48 is acceptable.
Okay.
I would certainly agree. I don't have a problem with 48 unless law enforcement would potentially see an issue where there may be situations arise that they need shorter notice.
I think there are some situations a shorter notice can be given if there is some kind of illegal activity going on, or you recognize some things going on there. It can be accelerated, so that's good to know too, at your discretion.
I disagree. I look at our city attorney. If we change it to 48, we can't say like, oh yeah, well today we just want it to be 2. mean, there's not leeway in with, yes, City Attorney Finch?
Well,
Certainly, if there's
No,
criminal
let's
activity,
listen to
law
the
enforcement has additional authority to get in. But that's not really the focus of this ordinance. I would say that if the commission were to say as a matter of course, they would like there to be 48 hours, I think that the police can post and give 48 hours. This is the minimum. And so once you set a new minimum, that is the minimum. And there's not going to be an exception under this ordinance for law enforcement or anyone else to go in and say, well, now we're going to, today we think it's important enough because this business owner is complaining about something in Legacy Square that we're going to now make it 24. It's either, you can always give more time than the minimum. You can't give less than the minimum.
Yeah. Because I was reading that about if contraband may be removed at any time by this without prior notice, and so I'm thinking that's what I was referring to. That's not enters into the hours, I guess.
I think that's one example, but I mean, I guess I continue to hearken back to what our city attorney just said. It's the minimum. We're not talking about the maximum. I mean, we're not talking about giving people grace, but saying like, hey, 24 hours is the minimum we're going to give. So I'm not sure 48 hours isn't, 48 hours could be given. But if we change it to 48 hours, it's always 48 hours is the starting spot.
Some historical perspective may be helpful. This ordinance was not drafted this year. This ordinance was drafted 2 years ago at a time when there were business owners coming to the commission, calling commissioners and saying, hey, we have a problem. Legacy Square was essentially the restrooms were unusable during all but the most major of events. And then the Grants Pass case from the Ninth Circuit and from the state of Oregon went up to the Supreme Court. And the decision was made to hold on this until we got an opinion from the Grants Pass case. So that opinion just came down earlier this year, and this item came back to you on the agenda. And so one might argue, well, the circumstances have changed. Yes, to some extent, and that's a measure of success of what's gone on. But just because we look outside and see conditions today, this is drafted to cover not only what we've seen in the past, some of what we see today, but also to account for what we may see in the future. And I would just say that the maximum extent of flexibility that you can give law enforcement is probably better on things like notice, but understanding and asking them to give as much grace or as much time as possible is also well within your purview as policymakers for the city. But maybe that will help in terms of understanding the timeline on why is this coming up now, and why did we draft the way we did.
Well, I guess if it came up on the 24 hours and someone said, look, can I have another 8 hours or 16 hours, the law enforcement would make that decision at that point, yes or no. It's like you said, the speeding ticket thing with, I get what
Attorney Finch, could you kind of clarify on camp, kind of at the very end of that first sentence, it says, or living in a parked vehicle. Along those lines, I've had people ask if someone has a camper or an RV in their driveway on personal property. I know that kind of gets into potentially a gray area. Is that something that's included in this? Is that an option for homeless folks if someone has an RV that's in their driveway for someone to reside in that, or is that included kind of in parked vehicles?
What page are you looking at? The very first page?
Under definitions, sorry,
Okay.
section 2,
Page 6.
under camp.
On page 1.
Packet page
R6,
6.
Page 1 of the ordinance,
Page one of the
page,
ordinance.
packet page 6.
Section 2 under camp, it goes down through sheets, luggage, backpacks. Then it says using any tents or living in a parked vehicle.
Mm-hmm. So right now, your zoning ordinance doesn't allow people to set up an RV and live in an RV, and essentially turn a single family lot into a two-family dwelling by adding that recreational vehicle. We allow for the parking of recreational vehicles and the storage of recreational vehicles, but not the use as campers on those lots. So you'd have an interplay between the zoning ordinance as well. And we would probably, were someone to say, hey, the in-laws are in town and, Christmas vacation style, Cousin Eddie's going to live outside in the RV for the week, we'd probably address that through the zoning code rather than through the camping ordinance.
Any other comments on this? Or any other questions?
This is this is one of those taboo conversations we never like to have, quite honestly. We try to do the best we can setting up here to balance what we can do for the individuals that are homeless and also what's best for the individuals that make substantial investments in our community, whether it's their houses or their businesses. And that's where I'm, I'm pretty sure we all are having that internal argument amongst ourselves, because I want to believe that this ordinance isn't all bad, as some people are trying to make it out to be. Chief mentioned the other day about the individual that it took 4 years for her to get the help that she needed, and is in a better place today than where she was 4 years ago. And I can't help but wonder, and maybe Julie, if you can answer this for me, I can't help but wonder if we had an ordinance like this, would it help provoke that? Would it help move that along a little bit quicker? Because and hear me out real quick. Sure. If I'm an individual out there and I continually get my stuff taken, do I finally get to the point that I'm tired of that and I make a different choice where it's not?
My personal opinion is no.
Okay.
And I'll make it quick. Most of the time, these people have a mental illness. And so until we can gain their trust and get them into a program, I don't think it will make a difference, because they've got nothing, and they're going to come to either the Blessing Box or Hope House to get that $25 so they can get their stuff back. And that's just the way. I mean, they're not going to have $25. And so essentially it'll be Hope House or the Blessing Box paying that $25, $50, $100, whatever you want to call it. I'm willing to pay for it out of my own pocket. I don't want to defy what the city has said, but my heart says I can't allow someone to just be stranded, especially we're in December. If this would have came up in early spring, early summer, it wouldn't be such a slap in the face. I don't mean any disrespect to anyone, but this hurts. And as an empath, which is my own issue, it really hurts me. And I will continue to do whatever I can to help these people, whether they're homeless. Not that it makes much difference, but we're working with someone who does have shelter, but has dementia. And he's often in my store. I'm going to help anybody that needs help, regardless of what their situation is. So that's my personal opinion. I could be wrong. I hope that I am wrong, but I don't think, after seeing everything that has transpired in the last 6 years that I've been working with the homeless, I don't see that happening. Thank you,
Julie. I appreciate your opinion.
Okay. Any other questions or concerns, comments? Which direction you want to move with this, commissioners? Or we can table this for another week if we need more time.
I'd be okay with waiting a little longer to make a decision.
Okay, is it good with everybody? We'll just,
I would ask for the staff's perspective if we could at least get a formal motion to table it. That way, whenever the commission desires to address the issue again, it can be removed from the table. business.
Okay.
So do we want to table it for an extended period of time, or do we just want to move it on for a week?
Wish of the commission. I can do either way. Move it indefinitely or for another week.
I would say I think a week's fine. I mean, I think if we table it indefinitely, we're just kicking the can down the road for a problem for either a future commission, for someone. I mean, we're making people unhappy either way we go. And I think it's our responsibility to do that. Ultimately make a decision that we think's best for the people we're serving, as unpopular as it may be. If that's next week, I mean, I think at some point, if it's spring, if we want to say we want to wait till winter's done and do it in March, that's fine. I just hate the idea of tabling it indefinitely, just because we're, not that we are, but if we were just scared to make a decision. I think if we have a reason that we are pushing it here in December, as Julie had mentioned, I think I could get behind that. But for lack of a better solution there, I would rather make a decision whichever way that goes than postpone it almost indefinitely.
I will say, I'm a little bit confused on it because I understand by the ordinance we're essentially asking people to move their camps, and likely that would probably be just outside of city limits, just realistically speaking. I don't want to sound heartless, but I'm not sure what the difference in doing that in December or moving their camp in May is. Like, we're not taking someone from a warm shelter and putting them outside. We're just asking for camps to be moved. So I also don't know that I see the value in waiting a long time. I would be fine postponing it a week. If anybody has any questions still, I've had all mine answered, but if the commission wants to deliberate another week, that's fine.
Chief, sorry to ask you a question again since you'd already sat down. And obviously, I know you can't speak on anything, I guess, that you probably have actively going. Is there concerns currently that, from your perspective, you're looking to use this tool once it's in place soon? As I know, because we've talked, this is kind of
No.
not a last-ditch effort, but kind of that once we've exhausted some efforts.
The answer is no.
Okay. Thank you. I think that, for me, that answer is kind of, if it's a week, if it's whatever that timeline looks like, there's no point, not no point, pardon me on that, no pressing issue that we're trying to kind of help solve.
I mean, we're going out every day working with the
Yes.
individuals that are still out there, but currently I don't know that there's an encampment that within the other ordinances available to us, which we have exercised and used already to clean up and move camps. We currently don't have one active today that I'm aware of, but we are working every day with people in this community that are homeless.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the will of the commission? You want to wait 1 week? You want it indefinite? Bring it up in the spring? I'd like to hear some recommendations.
Mr. Mayor, I'd be okay with waiting a week.
1 week? We have consensus for 1 week? Table this?
That's not what our city manager is asking for. He's asking for a motion to
Well,
table.
what I'm asking for essentially is direction on when you would like this considered again, so that we're not bringing it up weekly, or that we're doing it in a timely manner that's at the desire of the commission. That was ultimately what I was reaching for.
Mr. Mayor, I'd be okay with seeing this on our 18th agenda.
There we go. And I think we don't need a motion for that. We can just move it to the next week's agenda and we'll do it on the 18th. So let's do it then. All right. Thank you all for your input and we'll see what we can work out for you. Thank you. Move on to new business.
Item 11A, ordinance for hasty awards IRBs.
This ordinance authorizes the issuance of industrial revenue bonds, which will provide a sales tax exemption on materials and equipment for Hasty Awards expanded facility. We have Tyler with us today.
All right. Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Nice to be with you this afternoon. The next two agenda items do relate to Hasty Awards expansion. And before I get into the presentations, I'd like to mention that there are two individuals here that have joined us this afternoon. One, of course, is Mr. Steve Hasty, the owner of Hasty Awards. He's available to answer any questions that you have about the project. I also would like to introduce my colleague, Emma Kate Dillon, here in the front row sitting next to me. She is a a new colleague of ours. She summered with our firm in 2023. We managed not to scare her off, and so she's back. She's joined us in September as part of our Kansas Public Finance Group. So,
Great. Glad to
yeah,
have you.
yeah.
Tyler, are you leaving us?
I'm not leaving you, no.
Okay,
No, that's not the plan.
okay.
So.
All right.
So the first item here is the ordinance authorizing the issuance of the IRBs for the Hasty Awards expansion. And the recommendation, the request is that the City Commission approve this ordinance, which authorizes the issuance of the bonds in an amount not to exceed $2.1 million. In terms of the project background, this is a roughly 21,500 square foot expansion to Hasty's existing facility. The total project budget is about $3 million. The reason that the par amount of the bonds is $2.1 million is that's